An unprecedented moment sounding alarms to the West. The leaders of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are standing together in public for the first time as the Chinese regime reviews its military power. And President Trump setting his response from Washington, warning against any conspiracy against the U.S. On a Truth Social post Tuesday, President Trump said, quote, "Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." The Kremlin responded the next day, saying Putin was not conspiring with China and North Korea against the United States. China's military parade is being held to celebrate the country's victory over Japan in World War II. Today's Taiwanese government, the Republic of China, was the legitimate Chinese government back then, not the Chinese Communist Party. Across the strait, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te paid respects to the ones who fought in the Sino-Japanese War. He stressed that Taiwanese people love peace and will always uphold freedom and democracy. He added that they would not celebrate peace with the barrel of a gun. Analysts say that Beijing's military event holds a bigger political meaning. Its goal is to give authoritarian countries more confidence to challenge the West. Another Taiwanese expert says there might be more to it.
This so-called September 3rd parade by the CCP carries more political symbolism than military significance, because its real purpose is to erase the very fact of the Republic of China's existence.
The CCP claims Taiwan as its own, despite never having ruled it. As Beijing ramps up its military aggression towards the island, what can Taiwan do to defend itself?
Following NATO standards, Taiwan's defense budget next year will rise to about $28.8 billion. The second goal is to reach 5% of GDP by 2030. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense is making rapid adjustments in policy and strategy, channeling resources into asymmetric capabilities. The core of asymmetric warfare lies in cost-effectiveness, deploying low-cost, high-efficiency weapons. This includes various unmanned systems and precision-guided munitions. Although Taiwan's defense production is relatively small in scale, the battlefield environment works in its favors. If resources are invested in the right areas, they can act as a strategic lever and deliver outsized results.
Europe is also closely watching. The EU's foreign policy chief Kaja. President Trump also reminded China that many U.S. troops died in China fighting for the country's freedom during World War II. According to history figures, the U.S. provided $3 billion in aid for China. On top of that, Washington supplied weapons, aircraft, fuel, and food to help the nationalist government. At the time, China was ruled under the nationalists or the Kuomintang Party. They carried the fight against Japan during World War II. While China emerged victorious in pushing back Japan's invasion, the war left the nation deeply weakened. The communist forces took advantage of this by launching a civil war that eventually forced the nationalists to retreat to Taiwan. Now, as Beijing stages a massive military parade to mark the war's end, critics argue the Communist Party is rewriting history to portray itself as the hero. We spoke with Gregory Copley, president of the International Strategic Studies Association, about what China hopes to achieve with this parade. Gregory Copley, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Wonderful to be with you, Tiffany.
Now, China is going to have a massive military parade to commemorate the 80 years since the end of World War II. But it's a bit interesting. It seems like there's a battle of narratives, if you will, because last I checked, the Communist Party wasn't in power during World War II. So what is the history here? Why have the parade and not really touch on the U.S. involvement in defeating, at the time, Japan?
Well, the parade is strictly a propaganda piece, a piece of theater for the Communist Party of China. It's nothing to do with the reality of World War II. It's about the Communist Party trying to gain legitimacy as a great world power historically, when, of course, the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party of China literally have nothing to do with China's enduring history. It was, as you point out, the nationalist government of Chih-Hsien, which was fighting Japan through World War II and before World War II began, in fact. And at that stage, the nationalist government was also fighting the communist forces and warlords in mainland China. And that's basically where it stopped, because the communist forces, the People's Liberation Army as they became, really was about defeating the nationalists, not about defeating the Japanese. And it used the fact that the legitimate Japanese government, the nationalists of the Republic of China, were fully engaged in fighting Japan. And so the communists were free, in a sense, to fight the nationalists without having to worry about the Japanese. You could argue that the Communist Party of China was absolutely complicit with Japan in World War II, given that they used the Japanese tying down the nationalist forces as an excuse to gain power.
I want to dig into that a bit because there's a lot, as you mentioned, the communist was a rising power at the time. It wasn't yet in power. But on that point, why didn't the U.S. at the time maybe help the nationalists stem the communist rising? We did give them a lot of aid. I think it was about $3 billion, but it wasn't much in terms of military. So talk to us about the history there.
Well, the U.S. was, in fact, preoccupied with fighting Japan in other theaters, along with, this is very important to stress, it wasn't just the United States, along with the Allied powers, the Commonwealth and Britain and the like, fighting in Burma and Southeast Asia, and then fighting in the Pacific. In fact, the United States could not have done the job against Japan that it did if it wasn't allied with the support of Commonwealth states, particularly Australia, providing them with a land base to go into the Northeastern Asian situation. So essentially, the communist forces at that stage, as I say, were not fighting the Japanese, and the United States was going along its traditional path of supporting a unified China. Its policy, which led it to war against Japan in 1942, the plan at that stage was that the United States wished to guarantee the territorial integrity of China. China in the classical geopolitical sense, not China in the sense of the People's Republic of China. And as a result, US policy always, if you like, favored that territorial integrity of China. And when it became apparent that the nationalists were being forced out of control of the mainland and were forced to Taiwan and several other islands in the South China Sea and off the mainland coast, the US policy became one of support or tacit support, or at least not opposition to the creation of the People's Republic of China. This has always been the big fault in US Asian policy. It tended to support the territorial integrity of China as it saw it, and forced that approach on the League of Nations at the time. Instead of thinking about, well, why is the territorial integrity of China critical to the United States? It may be critical to China, but not to the United States necessarily. And why didn't the US attempt to support true allies in the region? Let's face it, China, over the past few thousand years, has changed its area and its borders so many times that we can't even say what the territorial integrity of China should be. We need to really rethink what US and Western interests are in what's now called China and the region, and not fixate on, if you like, ancient misconceptions about the situation.
Lawmakers in the House are taking aim.
I'm a six-figure funded trader, and I've passed plenty of challenges just like this one, using just one tool, the fib. And I'm going to show you exactly how to use it in just 60 seconds.
好，我们今天谈一个最大的主题，就是中共93阅兵。我认为它是一个篡位阅兵，它是一个伪阅兵啊。我的理由很简单啊，就是说他要用这样的一种政治的仪式啊，一方面巩固习近平的政权，一方面要给人民喂食所谓民族主义的鸦片啊。所以简单来讲呢，这次的大阅兵，我把它称之为下山偷摘人家种的桃子来吃，拿着别人的皇冠往自己的头上戴啊。那么我总结了他释出了10大的这个暗黑讯号，第一个就是说是摆出了这个大规模杀伤武器啊，杀伤的武器来做一种武力的展示啊。另外一个就是证明他在政治上是很稳，而不是地位不稳的状态。另外一个就是用这个偷渡啊，历史篡写的这个偷渡来形成一种叫做僭越的历史学 来改变啊，把中共代替国民政府来成为所谓的抗战的中流砥柱。最后呢，我觉得是大阅兵是提供给民族主义的鸦片大餐，还有就是秀出了习近平的枪杆子的肌肉主义。另外就是邀集这些全世界的这些寡头国家独裁国家来形成一种所谓的独裁的俱乐部。然后我们从游行人队伍看出里面这个法西斯主义美学就是一种极权主义的机械复制另外最后我认为就是我要把它重新翻转中共所提出的这个整个活动的一个称号，它中国人民抗日战争暨世界反法西斯主义反法西斯战争胜利80周年纪念大会，我把它改写成中共红色法西斯主义的斗牛大会其实我们谈到今年这个上合会这个问题我把它归结为2个特色，一个就是1年1度的政治大拜拜并没有任何真正的一个作用人数看起来规模很大，但是实质的影响力是非常有限的。另外呢，我把它称之为叫纳凉的单位因为从过去以来上合会本身基本上没有办法解决任何的问题，无论是在俄乌战争和俄乌和平谈判问题上没有发言权那么在有关的其他的国际事务上面基本上也只是一个路人甲所以它这个上合会本身，与其说它是一个上合会，我不如说它是一个上海乌合会基本上起不了任何的这个作用。当然，其中涉及到中之间关系的问题。习近平说中印两国可以龙象共舞首先我要告诉大家，龙象并不共舞，龙象目前的情况，中印之间只是龙象各怀鬼胎而已。